Welcome back to Chaotic Creatives, a show about embracing the chaos that comes from living a creative life.
We are your hosts, two self-proclaimed chaotic creatives. I'm Hom Sweet Hom. I was going to say I'm Lauren, better known as Hom Sweet Hom. You know what? Keep rolling. I'm Lauren Hom, better known as Hom Sweet Hom on the internet. It's been a long day. Whew.
And I'm Rachael Renee. I'm having a great day.
Yeah.
I'm your internet hype gal, here to help encourage you to live a creative and playful and fulfilling life.
And I'm a designer.
I feel like Lauren's maybe attitude is a perfect sort of segue into kind of what we're talking about today. We've been having a lot of conversations offline about a lot of different things, kind of sort of ethics and morals and values, because we talk about that stuff anyway, just in all aspects of our lives. But we have specifically been talking about the decision-making process, the hemming and hawing between when to accept a client when perhaps your values don't perfectly align, and when we feel comfortable maybe making concessions and when we don't.
Yeah, in client work, in all aspects of business, I think oftentimes, like in the last week or two, we've been talking a lot about just the tension of being a creative business owner, infusing your values into every decision you make, and oftentimes those decisions never being 100% perfect and having to be okay with that. And listen, maybe in full-time work too, that happens. But I find myself and my full-time creative, self-employed friends just going through it a lot of times. So yeah, recently I have been managing my own business 100%. I don't have an agent anymore, and I've just been, doing things myself. And it's really allowed me to be up close and personal. I'm the one fielding the emails. I'm the one doing all the vetting. And I recently had a couple projects where thank you for letting me talk your ear off about okay, it's a lot of money. And right now I need money. And for the first time in, let's say, 6 years, money has been tighter because work has been slower and some other things that I will not name specifically right now. But I oftentimes it sucks because when you need money to pay, payroll, rent, all these things, you have to make imperfect decisions. And you also, my morals and values get a little squishier when I have less resources or fewer resources. And I think about when I was starting out and I was just a young, scrappy, 23-year-old freelancer. One, I didn't really think too deeply about the kinds of projects I was saying yes to. If I'm being completely candid, one of the biggest projects I took when I was just starting out was for Poland Springs bottled water.
Okay.
It was doing lettering for a billboard in Times Square, and I took a picture with it. I posted that shit. I was so jazzed.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know any better. I mean, bless any 23-year-olds who are socially conscious and thinking critically. I'd like to think that social media and the internet has raised the consciousness of everybody, especially the youth. I wasn't quite there yet at 23, if I'm being completely honest.
The internet when we were 23 was not what it is today.
No.
We didn't have the same level of access, I think, to be able, had we been socially conscious youths, we probably could have found we could have found that information, but the landscape was different.
Yeah, I went to
10 years ago.
Ad and design school in New York, and I don't have super politically progressive parents, and so that wasn't really brought into my sphere.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't know any better. And I remember getting a comment on that Instagram post because I posted the picture of it being Newark, wah! And someone was like, "Oh, is that the evil water company?" And I was like, "Oh, are they bad?" And yeah, they're bad. But I say all this to say, now, 12 years into doing this, I find myself back at a place where I'm starting to think like, okay, well, here are some projects. I need the money. In another like life, or let's say 4 years ago, it would have been easier to say no.
Mhm.
But because I just went to culinary school, I spent down a lot of my
Yeah.
savings. I thought I would just come back and get my business right back on track, like no big deal. And things took a weird turn,
Mhm.
and business has been slower with some other things. And now I'm just like, okay, it's not perfect, but I ended up taking some of the projects, and we'll see how that pans out. And I will just have to live with that. But
I also think that it's interesting because in addition to the necessity, the need for more income, your morals and values are getting stronger and stronger because we're
Mhm.
learning more.
Mhm.
So you're actually holding yourself to a higher regard than you would have ever been anytime in the past. So I think, we have more access to information. We have the luxury of being able to make decisions based on what we know is going on in the world and how that's impacting us and other people surrounding us. Um, and I think, yeah, you're holding yourself to a higher standard, so you're having a harder time making the decision of yes or no because you're like, okay, well, I have developed these morals up to this point. And like Lauren, to be clear, I know the details of what she's talking about, and she's not working doing something terrible. It's
Yeah.
just, it's just,
Oh, that's true. Also, yeah, caveat. These are for clients that I've worked with in the past and had no problem with.
yeah,
I just didn't
yeah.
really think too much about it. And now we know more, right?
And we know more, and it's just we're being more critical, thinking about things. It's like the thinking about where you're spending your money, for example, as a consumer. Do I want to buy the pasture raised, locally regenerative farming, eggs, meat, dairy? Or do I just buy whatever's cheapest? It's like there are so many different layers to that. Like, do you have the luxury of buying the nicer thing? Like, do you even know about it? Okay, now you know about it and you have the money to buy those things, and you've set yourself up with this standard of buying all of the quote unquote best quality, best for the earth, best for the animals products. And then your income takes a hit. What do you do? Do you continue to buy those things? Do you have to adjust your morals and values to be able to fit into the lifestyle?
Mm.
Does this
Yeah,
analogy make sense?
absolutely. It's interesting thinking about it from the consumer angle. I
Hmm.
didn't really spin it that way either because we're talking about it from a production
Right.
angle. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of us, no matter how good of a year you had as a freelancer, or
Hmm.
years in my case, or like how many raises you get as an employee, like none of our livelihoods are secure. I think
Hmm.
that's what we're all recognizing.
Yeah.
And we might have to change our budgets and spending accordingly.
Yep. Yeah. And I think thinking about it from the perspective of you do have clients and work that you absolutely would say no to. And it's just finding the line, which is a big gray area because we always live in the gray area, and like certain circumstances, every decision that we're making is a variety of factors that are contributing to that decision.
Yes. And you and I have talked about this in the past as well. Like, being the face of our businesses, like solopreneurs, I guess I have employees, so solo-ishpreneur.
Hmm.
But I guess being the public facing, like, part of your business, it does hold you accountable in a sense that every project you take, you put your name behind, especially if it's influencer work or needs to be published, or you put it in your portfolio. Like, that is you and your name going on that thing
Yeah.
in a way that if you work, behind the scenes, or like I used to work in an advertising agency, and I didn't really have a say in what clients I worked on. Granted, I was only there for 9 months, so I don't know if I would have had to cross that bridge when I got there if there was an account that they put me on that I was like, no, I don't want to work on that.
Yeah, I mean, I have friends that work at agencies that have these giant clients, and it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't want to work for this company, not the agency, but the company that's
Hmm.
the client. But are you willing to quit your job over it? And, a lot of times we're not, because we need
Oh my
money to
gosh.
survive.
Yeah, and I would never begrudge anyone for not quitting their job over that, because you gotta eat.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting, adding the face to it.
Mhm.
As you were saying that, and I know we've had this
Mhm.
conversation before, but it reminded me in this moment of a job that I turned down, not a job, a client that I turned down because of them having access to the photos of me for a certain amount of time for their parent company. So, like, I was working with them or
Ooh.
planning to work with them on like a
Yeah.
creative thing, and the photos that they were going to take of me in my space were going to be able to be accessed by the parent company, and they had the ownership of those images because they were using their photographer. And I just had this icky feeling, and everyone I talked to in the interview stages and talking about this project and prior to signing the contract were great. I was really excited about it, and I just had this like gut feeling, kind of like the gut feeling we talked about in the last episode of like when you know that something's not quite right.
Mhm.
I had this feeling. I was like, I don't like, what if, you know, somebody like Donald Trump gets ownership over this parent company and then has access to my images, and all of a sudden my face in my studio is like on an anti-abortion billboard or something. Like, that is so extreme and wouldn't happen likely, but
Yeah,
I didn't have control over those images anymore, and I did not feel comfortable not knowing what my likeness would be looked like,
of course.
or used for rather.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, like, I know that probably wouldn't have happened, but based on like the ownership of the company, it wasn't like that example was extreme, but it could have been used for some other types of marketing that I maybe wouldn't have stood for. So I said no. I was like, "Hey, I can't do this. Sorry."
Yeah.
And I feel good about that
Mhm.
decision. But there have also been companies that I've done work for, and then someone messages me and said, "Oh, they're bad." Like, as an influencer, small scale, someone is like, "Oh, they treat their employees really poorly," or, "Hey, did you actually know that they're greenwashing?" And then you learn, and you're like,
Mhm.
"Thank you so much for sharing this information. I now have more information and can make a better informed decision next time." But sometimes the allure of, "Oh, yes, I need to pay this bill, and this opportunity seems like a good one."
Yeah, and I mean, if I'm speaking super candidly, I think any Fortune 500 company or like big
Mhm.
company, publicly traded, let's say,
Yeah.
is likely going to have some labor issues in a
Yes. So there's
capitalist economy.
totally, there's probably gonna be a misalignment with your personal values and their values as a company, which are to make
Totally.
money.
Yeah, and like I think that mm, I think again, doing things with our eyes open, knowing more so we can make more informed decisions. We might still end up working with those companies in one way or another, like
Mhm.
especially with the parent company stuff too. It's
Yeah.
wild. Like
Yeah.
the same, handful of very, very wealthy people profit from a small group of these companies doing well.
Yeah.
I've talked with Crystal about this before too. A lot of times too, like, we're all very online. I think people who listen to this podcast are likely also very online. A lot of what people might come for you in the comments, like, should you do a partnership or post work that you did for a client, if you're a designer or creative, if that company is catching heat in the media right now for doing something shitty, which is entirely possible, like
Yeah.
companies do shitty things, then you're going to catch that smoke too, most likely.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, my thoughts are like, yeah, for any big company, they're just not in the media cycle right now. Like, they didn't do something bad and it got reported on, but they're doing bad stuff behind the scenes.
Mhm.
There's a designer, Kyle. Hey, Kyle. Their Instagram handle is Hey, Kyle. I'm so sorry that I did not look up how to pronounce your last name before this because I didn't think I was going to be referencing this. But they presented at a type conference either this year or last year in drag, and it was lovely. I saw photos, but I saw a screenshot from the presentation, and it was a really great quote that they had in there. I think they might have written it themselves about graphic design is how capitalism gets dressed in the morning.
Whoa.
Yeah, And I thought it was
Yeah.
just very honest. Like, we as visual creatives, photographers, illustrators, designers, image makers, we partner with people with money, which are the brands, and help to sometimes like we help to get their messaging across.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so fascinating because we are so ingrained in this culture of capitalism that is what our art is often used for, right? Like we are creative people that are using that skill and that passion to make money to survive. And that the culture that we live in, it's encouraged for us to use that creativity. And if we get any sort of spark or ember of growth to skyrocket into like follow the line, the what did you call it earlier? The escalator of capitalism or the elevator or something.
it's like an escalator of commerce
Okay.
where if you just kind of let it do its thing, all of the carrots on the stick, like the incentives, will lead you to growing your business bigger, trying to make more money. Like, I think it's probably obvious, hearing us talk that we have progressive politics, more
Yeah.
left leaning. Regardless of anyone who's listening to like politics, I think it's important to learn about and understand how our economy works. Like,
Yeah.
so you understand the incentives and understand like what will be required of you and the challenges you might face when entering the market
Yeah.
as a soft creative soul.
Like we are encouraged in capitalism to take advantage of other people so that we can make more money or resources.
And the kicker there is to take advantage of other people, again, paying as little as possible, no benefits, but also to mine ourselves as resources. We are the ultimate resource of just an infinite wellspring of creativity when we know that's not true. Like,
right.
Oftentimes, my friend Andre and I have talked about this before. We were on the phone one day and we were talking about how I have this theory that as a entrepreneur, it's kind of fucked up because you are the employer and the employee. And oftentimes, like, again, when we're talking about ethics and values, you think about how if you had a team, how you would want to treat them, right? The kind of working conditions, the like not working overtime, like making sure everyone was compensated fairly, paying well, right? The way that we would treat other employees is not how we treat ourselves.
Oh man, I'm just giggling because both you, Kristle, and me all worked this weekend on stuff, and we all are bad bosses to ourselves.
Think about if you are self-employed, think about how bad of a boss you've been to yourself lately if you're feeling burnt out. And this is just an invitation to reflect on what are some ways that, we always treat other people and give other people like more benefit of the doubt and like treat them a little more generously than we do ourselves.
Yeah.
I think it's normal and natural. However, it's nice to take a step back and reflect on, could I be better to myself?
I mean, that is all about what I teach. Like literally making play a priority because we don't. And I think that when we can do that, and Kristle and I were talking about this right before we started recording about like, yes, we can bully ourselves into getting the work done, but we can also give ourselves grace. And for me, it was, yes, I got a bunch of chores done. I got my pitches and proposal shit done that I needed to do. But then also I allowed myself to rot on the couch and look at a quilt book and make a plan while I watched a rom-com. And that felt really good. Like that was my version of play, was like noodling on a quilt design. Kristle was playing the bass. Like we need those moments of play to be able to kind of refresh our brain, and we need to be nice to ourselves. And that is what I teach in Prioritize Play. But I think back to your comment about being our own bad bosses, that's such a good point. And I think we're encouraged to do that as much as possible so that we can make money and like be quote unquote successful. And then if we do have growth, it's encouraged for us to grow.
You want to capitalize on the capitalization.
Yeah. Like, oh, you had something that like really took off. Let's capitalize on that and now make a bunch of money and make as much as you can. And I actively fight against that. Like when someone comments and is like, what, are you going to sell those ceramics? Are you going to sell? Someone commented this week and I had a pair of like patchwork pants that I made. And they were like, oh my gosh, where'd you get these? And I was like, I made them. And they said, I would love to buy a pair. And I said, oh, I don't sell my sewing. That's just for me. And then they said, oh, well, if you change your mind, I would like to buy some. And I was like, no, I don't sell it. And it's very sweet and encouraging. But I feel like as creatives, especially when we're just starting out, so many well-meaning people say stuff like that. Like, ooh, I would love to buy that. Oh, can you make that? Oh, I would like to see you make it in this way. Or sign me up to buy it. And then you make it in the way that they expect and they don't buy. And so it's like going back to things we've talked about in season 1, like making things for yourself. But when you do have something that hits big and then you have the opportunity for growth, capitalism can really take the creativity out of your experience.
Yeah. And to your point about, prioritizing play, and it's so important because oftentimes we forget to. I think, we were talking in the car the other day on the way to dinner. I, as someone who does this full time for a living, when I wake up in the morning and I have my, small business owner list of things to do.
Lauren puts on her little small business owner hat.
I don't wear hats.
Your chef hat.
If you see me voluntarily in a hat in everyday life,
something is wrong.
Something has gone wrong. Same with a t-shirt. If you ever see me in just like a ball cap and a t-shirt, just
you're cosplaying me.
Like I'm about to rob a bank or something.
Yeah. She's going into witness protection.
Yes.
Meanwhile,
clearly.
I'm mostly wearing a hat. It's rare. You're catching me on a rare day if you're watching the video.
Yes, exactly. What was this thing? Oh, on the way to dinner. I think having fun or playing gets knocked down the list of priorities because there's like, quote unquote, in the short term, more important things like running payroll and like making sure emails get responded to and like sending invoices, that if that goes on for a week, 2 weeks, a couple months, it can be years that you forget to prioritize any kind of play, any kind of fun, any kind of space for daydreaming or whimsy in your regimented small business owner life. Because I like to joke that like oftentimes it feels like you have like your inner art kid on one shoulder and then like your little CEO on the other shoulder, just like fighting all the time. And the CEO oftentimes wins out because we live in a society where we have to pay so much money to exist. And if you let the little business person drive all the time, you will burn out. And we've talked about this too, where I want people to know if they're feeling burnt out or they have burnt out or they haven't prioritized play and you're feeling guilty, it's not your fault.
Yeah.
Because again, our economy incentivizes, hey, that thing that like you got a little bit of money for, like, why don't you make some more money from it? And like, okay, now you're making a living. That's not enough. Why don't you hire a team so you can focus on stuff that like can make you even more money? And and listen, if you want to do that, I've done a little bit of that. You get to pick and choose which parts feel good, what shiny object feels like, okay, I want to try that out. You can always readjust, do baby steps, but it's not your fault if you haven't been prioritizing play or fun or creativity, because once you start to monetize your creative work, you are now on an escalator where there's all these trap doors of like, how can you make as much money as possible? And no one got into creative work to make as much money as possible. We would have chosen something else.
Absolutely. And I think like not only how we're talking about prioritizing play, like I think so much of what I'm working on is getting people to see it not as a luxury, but an essential. Like say the same level as eating and sleeping and moving your body, which I know that when I get really busy and stressed out, I don't eat as well. I'm not sleeping as much. I I've always been the type of person where I'm like, I'm never gonna pull an all-nighter. Like in college, I never did it. I was like, well, I'd rather fail than not get sleep. Because I just can't function. So sleep is not one that I often give up.
Ooh, non-negotiable.
Yeah, it's great to know that about myself, but I will have bad eating habits or forget to eat, ADHD, hello.
Will you brush your teeth? Do you brush your teeth every night?
No. Not.
Can't go me either.
I was like every day. Yeah. I definitely do it every
I'll
morning.
get to it like 8 hours later.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Every night is tough. It's a habit that I'm working on building. I do brush them every morning. I'm really good in my morning routine.
At least once every 24 hours.
Yes. Yeah. And
For any potential suitors, we want you to know that we brush our teeth once every 24 hours.
We're clean-ish. We are gross girls, but like in an endearing way. Yeah, so I think that what I'm working toward in my creative work of in this umbrella of prioritizing play is getting people to realize that it is as essential, if not more essential, than the work, right? Like we can't survive without eating and sleeping, like maybe for a little bit, but not in the long term. And I feel that play is up there with those things because it's allowing yourself to decompress. It's giving your brain a chance to relax. It's like releasing endorphins and letting you access your creativity again. It's not just about being frivolous and being like, oh, I'm gonna, go do hopscotch because hee silly. It's getting out of your head and having a good time, which then allows connection to be made. It allows you to process your feelings. There's so much that is important that comes from what I'm calling play, but can be, your version of, I don't know, whatever your version of play is. Like
absolutely, it's
your creative practice or your yoga, whatever practices you're doing to sort of step away from the business CEO brain and let the creative art kid on the other shoulder take the lead for a little bit.
Yeah, I think it gives the creative art kid a voice, right, in the conversation when, the CEO is just like really is the person at the table that's talking really loudly over everybody else a lot of the times, because that is the carrot on the stick. That's what we're in the short term incentivized to do. But one thing I talked about in the talk I recently gave in Atlanta at Minted was most of us want to do this work. This is our life's work, hopefully. And so if you're in it for the long haul, you got to make it sustainable. Like we all love to talk about sustainability, myself included, but like in practice, like you got to implement some of those things.
Yeah.
And it can be easy to, push it to the side for a couple months, even a year. But you will feel the effects of it. And it reminded me of something that you said a couple weeks ago since we're talking about like infusing your values into your business and your creative like practice, about community. One thing that we were talking about in Atlanta was someone had asked, how do I want to be able to make space for personal projects and like I was talking about like making sure you savor some of your creative process, like go at a pace that feels luxurious to you, like have some projects that are like that. And usually that pace that feels luxurious means free of the pressure of like needing to make it go viral, needing for it to be like a smashing like financial success right away. And one bit of advice I got from an online course that I took years ago from Rachael Rogers, she runs a community called We Shall Be Millionaires, which, yes, I would like all of us to be millionaires, to be able to spend that money and have that breathing room. But one thing that blew my mind was one of her recommendations was in order to be able to focus on your business, and a lot of the people in her community are women, particularly like femmes of color. She was saying, particularly for women in heterosexual marriages and partnerships, if you want to make more time and space for your business or your creative projects or the thing you say you care about that you so desperately want to do, but you're just too spread thin, She said, ask your husband for help at home. Say, like, this is actually really important to me, and I need you to watch the kids or make dinner, like, these nights of the week or do the laundry. Like, it might be an uncomfortable conversation, but there are ways you can rely on others to help you make that space for play and creativity and slow making.
Oh, man. I mean, this conversation about community, I have two things to say.
Yes,
First,
please.
I just finished the book Night Bitch.
What? It's sorry. The name is
yeah. It's about this woman who's an artist in the Midwest.
Okay.
And she gives up her art career to have a child. And her husband travels all the time and she does everything. He comes home on the weekends. And there's a lot of resentment there. And then this story is wild. She like turns into a dog and she calls herself Night Bitch. And it's really interesting. It's like a fun, it's not fantasy. I mean, it is because she's like turning into a dog, but it could be perceived as like an analogy. It's really good. And ultimately, like she just starts to demand that her husband does more and then he does it. And then she has time for her art. And that's not totally the whole plot of the book. I would recommend it. It was a quick, I listened to the audiobook. It's a quick and good, entertaining read or listen. But I think that the conversation about community too is if we can make these connections, if we're, for example, playing, like let's say you just went to book club, I'm in a book club, you join a bowling league, you do something that is playful, you're meeting other people that you can rely on for things. And in capitalism, in America specifically, like we've idealized this nuclear family where it's like you don't ask people for help.
Yeah.
You don't even ask.
You're a little island, either as an individual or as a nuclear family.
Right. And you need to make all that money by yourself and you can't rely on your community. And I think there are lots of kind of conversations happening now about, at least I'm starting to become aware of the conversation. I'm sure that I know that there are many people that have been talking about this for a long time. But
we're not smart. We're just curious.
Yeah, we're learning and we're open to being wrong and learning and changing and growing. And I think that's our whole thing. Literally the wall behind Lauren says, keep growing. So I think that if we lived in society where we did have really strong community relationships and our basic needs were taken care of, if we had housing, food, and we didn't have to exchange our labor or our creativity for money to have our basic needs, we would all be artists, right? Like we would have that leisurely pace if we lived in sort of like an anarchist community where like everyone was taking care of each other. And I know that is unrealistic, at least how we're living right now.
Too. Yeah, I have no idea. I'm not as well versed. Anarchy.
I am also not, but I am trying to learn about more, just thinking from a community perspective because our government is failing us. So it's like the only people we can rely on are our community in mutual aid. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we give money to disaster victims. It means asking your friends to bring you toilet paper or asking your friends to make you dinner when you're having a really hard time. Yeah. That is mutual aid. That's depending on your community.
A pooling of resources.
And you have to be comfortable asking and providing that. And when we can start to feel that comfort with each other, and I think we can make those connections through play, through our creativity, we can have sort of like less pressure to do it all alone and make all that money to be able to buy all the things we need because we have that support. And that at least relieve some of the pressure. So it's like, okay, well, tonight, actually, I can work on my quilt because my friend is taking my kid. You know?
Exactly what you said. That's actually exactly what I said to the audience of mostly women at this conference with regards to creativity, maybe if you don't even need to be partnered to like enact some of these things, maybe you form a mom group or a friend group where like, let's say if you're all parents, one of you, one person per week will watch the kids and everyone else can focus on their art. That's art night for everybody.
Yeah.
And you kind of share the load. Or let's say if there are no kids involved, what if, you start a recipe club and this gets creative too.
Yeah.
Where one of you is in charge of, making dinner for like a meal prep kind of thing where you drop off dinner for, it's enough for a couple nights or something. And then it frees up time where people don't have to cook for a night or two.
Yeah.
And that frees up time to be able to work on an art project. It's just taking little things off of each other's plates, but in a way that everyone's getting a turn to take care of other people and be taken care of. Honestly, for me, as someone who is the eldest child in the family, and like, obviously I run my own business. And so like a big point of identity for me is like being a caretaker and like being the one who's like got this, like the friend in the group who like organizes the trip and like makes sure everyone's good to go.
We're the same in that
mom
regard.
Of the group.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes it's harder to receive help receive care.
Or ask.
Ooh.
It's been something that I've been actively working on in the past couple of years, is like recognizing that I love helping my friends. If someone asked me, can you bring me food? I don't even like cooking, but because you're asking, I will.
Yeah.
And it might not be the best food you've ever had,
and it doesn't need to be.
It's about like taking something off your plate. And I have to remind myself that other people love me and want to be able to support me in that way. So I'm going to start asking for what I need. So in the past couple of years, I've been like, hey, can you come over and help me move this rug? Or can you come help me paint my bedroom? Lauren, help me paint my bedroom because I hate painting.
And I love painting.
Yeah.
And honestly, being in community means getting to know people and knowing their likes, dislikes, their like strengths, their weaknesses, and like kind of filling in each other's gaps too. I think one thing that's been really beautiful about, I'm going to come help you paint your, I was like, I'm going to help Rachael with Halloween decorations, which sounds so fun. Kristle and I have been having a really lovely year together as our relationship started as a business relationship where
You were Kristle's bad boss.
Well, no, I have cool mom energy when it comes to being a boss, which is something I'm trying to work on too. Of like, please like me.
Actually, you're the employee, but I don't want you to do any work because that would be hard for
good.
you.
Yeah. One thing that's been like eye-opening for me is, as we've been working together for 5 years now, having more candid conversations about how the way we relate to each other, because we came into this in a business sense, like I'm aware because of my politics, the power dynamic between an employer and an employee. I don't want to abuse that. I want to handle that with care. But I didn't realize the ways in which I think I was closing myself off to some of like the wonderful aspects of Kristle and I's relationship now, only seeing myself as like, I'm Kristle's employer and I don't want to overstep. And the only value I can provide to Kristle as a human being is paying her paycheck. And besides that, like, I am useless to her. It was literally my mindset.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to overstep too. Because, you hear a lot of noise online, which is valid, that like, when companies say, we're a family here, toxic, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, you don't want to get too close to your employer or your coworkers even, because you're all in this weird soup of like work and life. And I think I internalized a lot of that. But then hearing her, talk to me about how she kind of saw it the same way of like, the only value I can provide to Lauren is my labor. And like, I must be a good employee. Because listen, we've talked about this. I'm a simp for work. When I'm an employee, I am just like, what can I do, like daddy boss? It's so bad. It is so bad, which is why
you have to work for yourself.
Yeah, I have to work for myself. I have to be a simp for my own business.
Yeah. And instead you're a dom.
Yeah.
Get it done.
It's been honestly one of the highlights of 2024 has been Kristle and I expanding our relationship outside of just work. Again, in a non-toxic way that I would think I was worried about. If like, oh, like I don't want to, we kind of compartmentalize work and work relationships and then personal relationships, but doing things for each other. Like I knew Kristle was really busy like over the summer, so I like meal prepped her a bunch of breakfasts, like frozen burritos. I know you love frozen burritos.
I just made a bunch yesterday.
And like Kristle bought me a hot water kettle like for my stove, and I had so many horrific feelings as someone who's like, wait, I can't, my employee cannot buy me a gift. This feels so wrong. Like money is supposed to only flow one way. Like resources are supposed to flow one way. But like we've been talking about, reciprocity, a two-way street, like being in community means giving and receiving and being okay with that. And also asking if someone needs anything and also asking for what you need.
Asking for what we need. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've talked about this, I know, in past episodes with like this silly example of my birthday party. Like I always wanted a partner to throw me a birthday party and
bake you cookies.
Yeah. And do nice things because I'm a thoughtful person. And so I always wanted a partner to do that. But I never asked when I was in a partnership. So it's partially my fault and partially the people I dated weren't necessarily thoughtful in the same way that I am. Or wanted to receive that thoughtfulness. And so I threw myself a birthday party and I was like, hey, can you make cheesy potatoes? Can you do this? Can you do this? And my friends were all like, yes, of course. And if we can ask for how, like, tell your people how you want to be loved, because we all love following instruction, right? Like if you tell me, oh, I actually really would love it if you could drive me to this place because I don't have a car.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. Unless it's the day I was supposed to bring you to the airport and then forgot. But we're gonna pretend that day didn't happen. We give each other
grace. But to reference that example, you mentioning, hey, like because I was going to the airport like right after we recorded one day, and you were like, oh, like I'll just drop you off, and my natural reaction was like, no, you don't have to do that, and you were like, but I want to, and it's okay to inconvenience people, like the same way you and I have been doing that thing like for maybe a year now, where we don't split the check when we go out. We just take turns paying.
Yeah.
Because of this idea, I don't know where we heard, maybe on a podcast, about the monetary exchange is really fascinating because when you give someone money, it almost says like, okay, we settle up our balance and now we can part ways. And technically, we don't owe anything to each other. If we never wanted to see each other again, we don't have to. The example I've been given in the past was like, it's for the same reason why you would never pull out $100 at like Christmas dinner and give it to like whoever's house you were at, being like, thank you so much for your time and resources and like labor.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to have this $100 as a token of my appreciation. We would never, that would be like a social faux pas.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But we do it with like, you know, when you're out to dinner, you're like, okay, you had this. And I think that's not bad. I understand why.
Can you imagine like going to your family's Christmas dinner and they have like a scale and you have to weigh your plate and then that's how
like a frozen yogurt shop?
Yeah. Oh man.
Like a Whole Foods hot bar?
Yeah. Oh my God. I feel like we're probably close to our time.
We are.
But I obviously, you know, we didn't even talk about some of the things that we were planning to talk about, which
I can bring us back. Well, I was gonna say that one person we were gonna mention was Lolly Ceramics. Both of us follow her on Instagram. I think this would be a nice note to end on. It's about, she made a post recently about scaling back her business, and I could definitely relate to it. All the themes that we've been talking about throughout this episode of like growth at all costs, like if you don't really stop to think twice, everything will push you towards away from creator and into a manager role. If any graphic designers are listening, there's that meme in our industry where it's that graphic of like the amoeba to caveman to like human, like that kind of amoeba to monkey to caveman trajectory. But then above it, it's supposed to be the trajectory of a like graphic designer in corporate. And as you progress, as you start out, you know all the programs. It's like all the icons of the programs you need to know. And then when you get to creative director, which is like the top one, it's just a bottle of champagne. Like you're not even doing anything.
Oh, man.
And listen, I think a lot of people are striving towards the creative director paycheck. Like I certainly was when I was in the agency world. However, in Lolly Lolly Ceramics' post, that's her Instagram handle, not her government name.
That we know of.
Wild.
We don't know her personally.
Yes. Love her work. She was talking about
like she had grown a ton and had, I think she said 12 employees, and she made this post recently about stepping back and recognizing, actually not even her recognizing, but her partner recognizing that she was experiencing burnout, and has decided to like give her employees enough time to make new directions with their careers. And she followed a dream that she's always had and moved to New York and wants to go back, like revert back to designing because she missed being a creative. And I think that trajectory is so common in a creative's field, especially if you find success, which I was scrolling back in her Instagram and looking at her 100 cup challenge.
I think she did the 100-day project, but for ceramics.
Yeah, and it was beautiful. I love her work. And that's when I started following, which we've talked about containers and how like a challenge is a really good opportunity. So she's a great example for that too. But finding success and then, shifting gears from wheel throwing and hand building to slip casting and then expanding, that's such a huge amount of work and probably pressure that she had to feel. And I don't know this person, but I feel very proud of her that she was like, this isn't serving me anymore. I have to shift. I have to get back to the creativity.
Absolutely. I admire that so much as someone who can feel like a little bit of her story because, I think everything about the way we've been socialized to think about our careers is this exponential growth, upward trajectory. And it's honestly really fucked me up this year, as you've probably, had a front row seat to this. Going to culinary school, I knew was going to put a slight pin in what I was doing. And I was comfortable with that of, again, prioritizing play, going to pursue a dream and a goal of like going to cook for a year and like not really having an end goal with it and just experimenting, like truly a year of prioritizing play. What I wasn't expecting was this kind of whirlwind of coming back from culinary school, going through my breakup, going through a slowdown in business and this big shift of not having an agent anymore and having to just contend with, this doesn't feel like I put a pin in it. This feels like I'm actually reverting. And that feeling so profoundly bad.
And I feel like when you were starting to recognize that, you were putting a lot of pressure on yourself. Like, I am a failure.
Yes.
Instead of recognizing, that it's part of the ebb and flow and you're navigating this with grace.
Thank you. Because I think I'm an optimist, but I also, again, learning how our economy works, knowing the currents of capitalism, like, even though I know that business is not always going to be exponential growth or an upward trajectory as a freelancer, in the back of my mind, I'm like, but I can do it,
But we all want it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like
it'd be nice if that happened, but I also know how precarious, even for anyone who's looking at me as like, oh, she has my dream job, like career goals, whatever. Yeah, I love what I do. And
#girl boss.
The tiny girl boss that lives inside of me. She's still in there. She still whispers in my ear.
Yeah.
And listen, girl boss is basically the CEO we're talking about on the shoulder. We need to have
Jeff Bezos in a wig.
Jeff Bezos in drag.
Yeah. Oh man.
Oh gosh. Yes. Jeff Bezos. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I'm doing right now. Are we gonna create a character for the podcast?
Jess. Oh. Oh man. Okay,
back to girl boss. Like if you sell any of your creative services or products in a marketplace, like you do have to put your little business hat on and like listen to your inner girl boss. And that's what she was saying in her post of like, it's so nice now to have sorry, I can't look at you. It's so nice to now be working with clay in a way that I'm not thinking about profit with every single piece that I make. And we've talked about this in season 1. This is the reason why I was loving ceramics as like my play because I'm so slow at it that I would never monetize it because one, I would feel like a clown charging $3,000 for like a ceramic baguette, even though I'm sure there's one person in the world who pay for it. That's just, it doesn't excite me the way that
you're not in it to make money.
No. And it's not profitable. And I have no interest in being a production ceramicist. Whereas I, for whatever reason, was fine with and even drawn towards being a quote unquote production like hand lettering artist. It was something that I got good at, that similar to what Lolly was saying about having quick success and then growing the business. My Tumblr blew up in 2012, which we were talking about before we started recording, was a different era of internet as well.
Yeah.
And so that was niche internet era where, it blew up. I had 50,000 Tumblr followers, but that led to freelance work, not like any like notoriety necessarily, or like even Tumblr, the anonymity of Tumblr. No one knew my face in a way that like now if you blow up on Instagram, you're a personal brand, whether you want to be or not.
Totally.
And you can choose to capitalize on that or not. I understand why people do. Fuck, I would still do it now. But I think these conversations are important, and I'm glad people are talking about like, the turbulence of quick success or even just internet virality and all this stuff, because it can be financially rewarding. Like the person that's coming to mind right now is the Hawk-Tuah girl.
I have been blessed. I don't know that.
I'm so glad. I listen to a lot of media analysis.
Okay.
And people get their 15 minutes of fame, right? And when you capitalize on something like, it's like, I think a better analogy might be like child stars that we saw growing up.
Sure.
Where, yes, you're famous, you make money, people love you, people think you're attractive. Like you're literally getting all the flowers from society that we're told that we should want. But it is such a doozy to be available for public consumption. And then not only like your personhood, but your creativity. And if you don't have a solid foundation or you haven't thought these things through the same way I didn't really think about my values and ethics when I was freelancing when I was 23, which I don't fault myself for, it can be easy to just kind of like be pulled in every which way. And now I do feel like I have more of a firm like stance.
Yeah.
But it still is difficult because you're making tough decisions. Because when you have a firmer stance, I think things oftentimes feel like opposed to a lot of the things that you like stand for and that you're like your values. And so I think we wanted to end on referencing that post because it's okay to, everyone I think gets the spark. If you catch any kind of wave of success, it's easy to get swept up in it. It's actually good if you're curious about it to try and ride it out should you want to.
Yeah,
and experience that. And then you can always go back.
Yes.
I think knowing that you can always turn around or that you're in the driver's seat and you can always like reduce, like scale back. It's not a failure. It's a creative decision.
Yeah.
It's a more minimal setup.
I think it's really admirable when people do this. I think when people close businesses that have like virality and have public success, a lot of people are disappointed. And I think it's even braver for people to close their businesses. Not even that she's closing. I don't know.
She just scaled back.
It's different. Yeah.
She said she's going to be focusing on interiors, furniture, just exploring, giving herself the gift of the space of having time to explore other interests.
Yeah. I think it's so, so important for us. That's why I talk about reflection so much, because we have to know if the thing that we're doing and spending all of our time and energy and stress on is providing value to our lives.
Yeah.
Like if we are sacrificing our mental health or our physical health for this goal that society says that we should want, is it worth it? Sometimes it is.
Yeah.
It depends on what the goal is and how it's fulfilling you, if it is fulfilling you. So yeah, I think it was really cool to see that. And the fact that we both were like thinking about it independently and then talked about it.
Sometimes I love how small the internet is.
Truly.
Like you and I, of course, would have similar algorithms.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. So before we wrap up, of course, I want to ask you what you're excited about. What projects, what play are you working on right now? I know you're in maybe stress mode.
It's fine. The recent play that I've done is I foraged some crab apples down the street
Okay.
and I made apple jelly because crab apples are high in pectin, which is the gelling agent in jams. And I made Kristle some applesauce because I know Kristle loves applesauce.
Beautiful.
So I got to do that. I also went dancing last night, which felt
Mm.
really nice to like move my body. I was on the phone with my friend Lauren years ago. This is like shortly after lockdown happened. And I was telling her that while journaling, I realized that I grew up dancing. You and I have talked about this. I grew up dancing. I did like ballet and jazz and just all these like anything at the rec center, basically. And then I would go like clubbing in college for like 2 years.
Mhm.
Because, like, 18-year-old me in New York City. And then after that, I stopped dancing. Just like, okay, now I'm an adult. Now I gotta like hunch over my computer. And I forgot about how playful and like how expressive like moving your body
Yeah.
is. And like it really is a release. The same way that like spending time working on like a creative project is fun or like kneading bread dough or whatever. Dancing is, I always forget how much I love it.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a playful thing that also comes with like the physical nature of like
Yeah.
physical release. I think I've talked about the book Burnout.
Endorphins.
Absolutely. I think I've talked about the book Burnout before on the podcast, but having a physical cycle for the stress in your body to be released is really important. And so they recommend physical exercise. And dancing is, of course, one of those things. Like an animal in fight or flight shakes when it's like escaped the predator, for example, because it's releasing the stress from its body. But we are, you know, societal programmed creatures to not like shake or scream if our boss yells at us or if we're having a hard week or a deadline or something. And so if we're not moving our bodies to allow that stress cycle to complete, it's being stored. The body keeps score, as they say. So
I
I
have
feel
heard
like
that, yeah.
the dancing is
Hmm.
a really good release for that.
I actually heard, I'll let you go to yours after this, because I heard the same thing happens when we scroll on social media and see like emotionally inflammatory posts,
Mhm.
which is normal. But like if that gets shown to you, like not at your own will, like because you're just like scrolling, seeing what you're seeing, we have the stress hormone that's released, but there's no release in terms of like running or shaking, like you said,
Mhm.
and it just builds up.
Mhm.
And that's why it feels so bad to do like a doom scroll.
Yeah. I don't know, and maybe it's because I'm a sensitive little creature, but I can't really even watch. I know you don't like gory stuff.
No.
I can't even like. I watched there's an Alexander Skarsgård movie. It's a
Hot.
Viking movie. I thought so, but it was so like violent because they were depicting the way the Vikings were. I literally had to do breathing exercises in the theater because it was stressing my body out so much.
No.
And I think that I read somewhere or heard on a podcast or something where it's like our brains don't know the difference of us not actually experiencing it.
Oh.
So people that are not bothered by like gory, violent stuff, are you okay? Maybe they're releasing their stress some other way, but I was holding on to it, and
Maybe they're releasing it other ways.
Yeah.
I know some people who like horror film.
Yeah, I mean, me too.
Yeah.
Anyway,
What's your play? What's your fun?
my play?
Giant eyeballs.
Giant eyeballs. Yes, this will come out after Halloween. But last episode I talked about being a clam with a pearl, and I have since changed my mind to be a werewolf. And Lauren hates my inspiration pictures, so I can't wait to do it. Lauren's gonna help me tomorrow paint some paper lanterns into eyeballs for my front porch. But I also I remembered that I had a bunch of old quilting books and decided to just browse through them and save some stuff for inspiration. And I did a little noodling and like color theory, sort of planning a quilt, and I'm really excited.
Love that.
Yeah. Anything else you want to chat about?
I got my sourdough starter out of the fridge for the first time in a while because it's Kristle's doing her prayer hands because it's finally getting cool enough to bake.
Yay!
So I've reactivated it, and it is. You can actually see it. It's bubbling on the counter. It's behind the chocolate chips.
Oh, I see.
And it is healthy and active. And this week I'm gonna bake sourdough.
Well, if you need a second person after Kristle to give any extras,
I can make multiple loaves at once.
I would love to be a recipient of your bread.
Mm-hmm. I want to try to recreate as one like more intensive project. This is very Michigan specific, but hey, Midwest listeners, there's a like chocolate cherry bread from Zingerman's that's like so good. It's like maybe it's nuts and dried cherries. It's sweet and just like with a slather of like salted butter. Kelly got me a loaf one year, and I was just like, "What is this?"
Yeah, please make that and let me test it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm gonna try.
Bread and butter is the ultimate.
So good.
Oh,
amazing.
Great. Yeah, I'm also excited about all the Halloween candy that I have.
Yeah, Rachel brought over some caramel apple pops, one that she's finishing up right now. It's getting into that razor blade territory for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
Delicious.
Which means I should, in fact, brush my teeth today. On that gross girls note, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.